Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Jessica Penton with Vision 33. I'd like to thank you all for coming out today to our webinar in partnership with Enware. Before we start, I'm going to introduce you to our speakers and just go over a few housekeeping details. So on the line we have Ralph Hess, Vice President of Global Channels for Enware Technologies, and Ian Hobkirk, Managing Partner of Commonwealth Supply Chain Advisors. All lines will remain on mute until the question and answer component of the session begins. Please make sure that you enter your audio PIN if you want to be able to speak at that time. We will also be sending a copy of this recording to all participants after the call. So keep an eye out to your emails. And now I'm going to pass this over to Ralph Hess of Enware. Thank you, Ralph.
Thanks, Jessica. Appreciate it.
No
we really appreciate Vision 33 hosting us today. And hopefully we have a really nice set of content that people can understand some of the issues that are, existing in today's supply chain for small to mid-sized enterprises. Ian has some really fantastic results of some surveys that they've done, along with kind of feeding into some of the process refinements that companies like yours should be making as they're looking to optimize their supply chain and warehouse. So as we look across today, what will be the points that we'll be covering are the supply chain challenges. Ian will be talking to that, as well as some warehouse optimization and best practices within operational systems. I'll be talking about the demonstration of Lisa Warehouse Management, a warehouse management solution for SAP Business One, which will really kind of bridge the gap from some of the things that Ian speaks to and how those can actually be implemented in the enterprise like yours today. At that point then I'll cover some trends in data collection technologies that we're seeing out in the marketplace today, really some ways that people are applying technology to be able to speed up and mobilize the collection of data within their warehouse for real-time validation. And then at the end, as Jessica said, we'll entertain questions and answers. So without further ado, what I'll do is I'll turn this right over to Ian, and he'll start